From allegations of political corruption
And categorically state that I have done absolutely nothing wrong, absolutely nothing corrupt.
to Caribbean nationals journeying to the Middle East to fight for ISIS.
My ambition is to migrate to the Islamic State and live within the caliphate.
The show's second season traveled to the corners of the Caribbean and the world. We take a look back at the biggest moments on this episode of 18 Degrees North.
Hello, I'm Zara Burton and welcome to a special edition of 18 Degrees North. It's been an amazing season where more than 80 different reporters, story producers, camera crew, you name it, we've all been working to report on Caribbean stories that have global impact. As this round of shows comes to a close, we wanted to take a look back at some of the stories that made an impact on you. And we'll begin with one of the most embattled politicians in the Caribbean. Michael Misick, hailing from the tiny British overseas territory known as the Turks and Caicos Islands. The country's popular former premier is facing corruption charges leveled by the British for allegedly selling off Crown land improperly in exchange for bribes. For this rare TV interview with Misick, we traveled to the Turks and Caicos Islands at 22 degrees north and 72 degrees west. You were assessed by the British that there were a lot of shenanigans going on in your government, that there was a lot of monies being passed over to you and to your party, and it was in exchange for lands that you were essentially selling off to investors at bottom dollar prices.
I can categorically state that I have done absolutely nothing wrong, absolutely nothing corrupt.
And
so,
yet you do have several cases that have been settled that would imply, insinuate that you and your party received monies. There have been several developers, including even Sandals Resorts.
There's an understanding that none of them admit any guilt.
Nobody is arguing that you didn't help this economy grow. I think it's how you were able to get it done.
By giving concession. The same thing that they do in the Bahamas.
Did he give Mr. Stewart concessions?
Of course. He was given a concession to pay a lesser duty. But not only he was given it. All of the developers.
The Constitution requires that elected officials declare financial interests. You didn't, and in response to questions from investigators, in a written response, you said there has been a cross-party culture not to. How is that not a problem? I don't understand.
There was a register of interest, and I've always registered my interests. I cannot go into to matters in relation to my criminal charges.
Your wealth, it went from, in 2003, reported at 50,000, and last report I saw was that it had gone up to, in the heydays, $180 million.
Wow. It's a lot of money.
That's
huge. Yeah? Wow. I've been in business here in Turks and Caicos since the early 80s and have worked hard and have earned a good living way before politics.
I thought I heard that your assets were seized. I think you had actually put in a request for them to be giving you allowances every single month. Mm-hmm. So is it out of those allowances that you're now paying for your attorney?
I am now on legal aid.
What does that mean?
The government of the Turks and Caicos will be paying my legal fees because I have no money to spend on my own legal defense.
I was watching an interview, I think it was some years ago, with your ex-wife, Lisa Ray.
The allegations of rape, that you put yourself in a position to be able to have a woman scream rape, that is absolutely unacceptable.
There was no charge and it was a frivolous allegation. As long as you're a man, sometimes even if you're in a trusting position, people make allegations for different reasons. There's a saying, a guy said, he liked weddings, but it's the marriage that sometimes is difficult to manage.
Now 18 Degrees North speaks exclusively with Lisa Ray McCoy about her ex-husband, Michael Misick.
I will say I still love Michael because of the kind of person that he was to me. There's love there. I don't think that I will ever harden where I would say, no, I don't love him. Will we ever get back together? I have learned not to say never. We're able to be cordial. We're able to talk to one another. We're able to express to one another what happened in our marriage. And that's progress.
Viewers took to social media to tell us what they thought of our interview with Michael Misick. After the episode ran in Cayman, Marjorie Ranjit Brancroft posted on Facebook, "God help if someone like him should get back in power and then Turks become independent. The man is a crook." Indira Saunders tweeted, "Watching this Michael Misick interview on 18 Degrees North, great interviewing. Come to the Bahamas next, please." Well, Indira, keep watching 18 Degrees North to find out where we'll show up next. This next report examined Jamaica's popular police commissioner, Owen Ellington, whose resignation was announced in June 2014. The reasons given: to separate himself from a probe into death squads in the police force and from a commission of inquiry probing the deadly actions of security forces in West Kingston in 2010. Now, we may never know the full reason for his resignation, but in our investigation, 18 Degrees North learned some personal affiliations of Mr. Ellington may have made Jamaica's international partners uncomfortable. We looked at one such controversial relationship right here in Jamaica at 18 Degrees North and 77 Degrees West.
Christopher Michael was arrested this afternoon at 4.
It was a role in which he thrived, according to his former professor at the University of the West Indies.
I think he was one of the most effective, probably the most effective commissioner we've had in a very long time.
By 2011, he had fired hundreds of corrupt cops, instituted more training, and murders dropped 33%.
Commissioner Owen Ellington.
Ellington was named the Gleaner's Man of the Year.
Deputy Commissioner of Police Owen Lloyd Ellington.
It had taken Ellington 30 years to land the top job, having been passed over before. A 2008 WikiLeaks document originating from the American Embassy in Kingston revealed that then Prime Minister Bruce Golding chose Ellington to be commissioner in 2007, but there was no international support. While Ellington was seen as intelligent and capable, the cable said he was suspected of having links to criminal organizations. That concern was confirmed to 18 Degrees North by former Assistant Commissioner of Police for Anti-Corruption Justin Felice. He says he warned Ellington more than once about his questionable associations. Errol Cliff Richards, nicknamed Schoolboy Richie, met Ellington in 1980 at training school, then in Port Royal. According to Richards' testimony in the late 90s, the two became very close friends. Both men admitting in court documents they were reprimanded for renting cars they had bought using a tax discount provided to police officers. It was one of these cars, similar to that pictured here, that prosecutors said was falsely reported stolen by Richards. He and Ellington were charged with conspiracy to defraud a local insurance company, along with Richards' common-law wife, Janice Bernard. Richards and Bernard were eventually found guilty and sentenced to 1 year in prison. The court found Ellington had no case to answer after his attorney Richard Small argued he no longer owned the car. Richards was booted from the force, but he and Ellington have remained friends, according to several of their mutual associates. When Richards got married in 2006, years later at Sandals Duns River in Jamaica, one Owen Ellington signed as his witness, a signature resembling that of the then Assistant Commissioner of Police. And even in 2012, documents show relatives of both Richards and Ellington were co-owners of this unmarked security company named Millennium, registered in 1998 when the two men were suspended from the force and still in operation today. The friendship between Ellington and Errol Richards may have never become an issue had Richards not been arrested for violating U.S. narcotics laws years later. The indictment against Richards was unsealed on June 19th. 11 days later, Ellington's retirement was announced. It was not a major surprise to Professor David Rowe, given that international partners had invested millions of dollars to fight crime in Jamaica.
When the senior police officer in Jamaica is associated with an individual who is engaged in the sale of cocaine to the United States and is indicted by a federal grand jury, this has a very embarrassing impact on United States foreign policy with respect to Jamaica.
With international partners already very concerned about the extrajudicial killings by Jamaican police, while Ellington was at the helm, Richards was yet another smear on his record.
I think the indictment of his close associate, Richards, was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Ellington, when contacted, referred us to his lawyer, who we could not reach. There is no proof Owen Ellington committed any crime. And Clayton also says it's unfair to judge a cop by the company he keeps.
It's very difficult to get to a senior position in the Jamaica Police Force without knowing some criminals. You wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't know some criminals. But that's a far cry from saying that you're actually involved in any way in any kind of criminal activity with them.
After our report aired, a Jamaican news outlet quoted an attorney for Ellington saying his client is not a close associate of Schoolboy Richie and that there was a time in the distant past when they were squaddies. When we finally reached that attorney, Howard Mitchell, he said he no longer represented Ellington as he had retired. We've tried to reach Mr. Ellington several times since without success. Coming up on 18 Degrees North, Caribbean Muslims drawn to the Middle East to fight for ISIS.
My ambition is to migrate to the Islamic State and live within the caliphate.
But how is life now for Caribbean nationals already there?
It's really boring at times. You know, it's really cold.
The Caribbean's role in the international fight to stop ISIS when we come back on 18 Degrees North.
The preceding segment was brought to you by
JN International Money Transfer.
I have to find it.
Yes, 10 for Trafalgar Road.
My sister sent it.
Hey cuz, I sent $300 through Jane to help with Auntie. Hang in there, man.
My son.
For all the everyday miracles we want to come true, send funds with JN Money Transfer. It's love well sent.
Now to the evolving threat of Islamic State or ISIS. The group has captured prisoners, beheaded international aid workers and journalists, even burned people alive. And yet, ISIS continues to attract followers from all around the world, including from right here in the Caribbean. One U.S. general recently said nationals from countries like Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago had gone to Syria to fight for ISIS. While Jamaica has denied the claim, Trinidad has confirmed that some of its very own citizens had gone to join the rebel group. Our search for how and why Caribbean nationals are signing up took us to Trinidad, London, Jamaica, and Argentina. We begin in the Twin Island Republic at 11 degrees north and 62 degrees west.
There's at least a dozen of them. Milton John Algernon, Shane Crawford, Abu Abdurrahman al-Trinidadi, Shazam Mohammed. Just some of the Trinidadians suspected of having gone to fight for the Islamic State or ISIS, and happy to serve on frontline duty.
I know John looked like he died of natural causes.
Their leader is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who's been called the true heir to Osama bin Laden. Determined to establish a hardline Islamic State, he's captured wide swaths of Syria and Iraq and seized oil fields, from which he earns millions of dollars.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Please, all all believers, come. Who can make it come? Come to Sham as soon as possible.
The U.S. estimates that just over 30,000 people are fighting for ISIS, some from Europe and even its own country.
The whole fact that the coalition is led by the US, which is perceived within the jihadists that is the root of all evil, the root of all injustice and imperialism that is destroying the Middle East, that's incredibly powerful as a weapon for Islamic State recruitment.
Technology helps too. This online sermon on Christmas Day 2014 had about 250 attendees and painted an ideal picture of the Islamic State.
Free food, clothing and shelter. Also free gas, free electricity, free water for every citizen, Muslim and non-Muslim.
Who is the accuser?
We caught up with one of the sermon's organizers, Sheikh Faisal, an Islamic cleric imprisoned for inciting murder in Britain and deported to Jamaica in 2007.
My ambition is to migrate to the Islamic State and live within the caliphate.
And what will you do in Iraq?
I suspect they will ask me to teach, but I would rather do teaching as well as fighting, not just teaching.
But despite the promise of an ideal Islamic State, the reality on the ground may be far different. A recent report says 200 foreign fighters were killed for wanting to return home. And in this Skype chat obtained exclusively by 18 Degrees North, one Trinidadian woman who had gone with her husband and kids to live in Syria in November 2013 recently expressed to an imam she wanted to leave.
If I go from the Islamic State, am I a kafir? Sometimes it's really hard here.
Where would you go?
It's really boring at times.
You're not a kafir if you still support the dollar in your heart.
You know, it's really cold. Plus, most times I'm by myself with the kids. So frustrating. No insulated houses here, so I only have this electric heater I use when electricity comes. It's so hard.
And what would happen if she or others in Syria tried to come back to Trinidad?
The evidence-based information that will be gathered, and then the necessary law enforcement actions will be taken.
But can Trinidad really stop the free flow of alleged terrorists? The UN resolution the country recently co-sponsored to restrict the movement of ISIS fighters has added little to local counter-terrorism efforts. With the US having already spent $1 billion and counting, and yet to make a meaningful dent against ISIS, the question is, if they can't do it, how will Trinidad?
In that episode, we also profiled Trinidadian Muslim leader Yassin Abu Bakr, who was denied entry into Jamaica in 2014 because he was seen then as a threat to national security. In that report, seasoned journalist Raul Panton gave us his first-hand account of being held hostage as Bakr and others attempted to overthrow the Trinidadian government in 1990.
At one point in time, we had a bit of a brief conversation where he said to me, "I'm a believer in democracy." And I said, "Really? But what you are doing is very, very strange for a man who believes in democracy."
Sadly, Raul Panton passed away on January 14, 2015, just as we finished production. He was 71 and is said to have gone peacefully in his sleep. He is greatly missed. Up next, the country with the highest rate of suicide in the world.
Do we have a serious problem? The answer unequivocally is yes.
Why are so many in this CARICOM nation taking their own lives? Find out next on 18 Degrees North.
The preceding segment was brought to you by Dominic Construction of New York City. For all your construction needs, visit our website at www.dominicconstruction.com.
If you're one of the millions of Americans who are disabled and unable to work, you may be entitled to disability benefits through Social Security. Receiving benefits is your right if you suffer from a physical or mental disability. Whether you're applying for the first time or you've already been denied, we can help. You'll be matched up with an advocate who will evaluate your situation, handle your application, and deal with Social Security for you. And best of all, there's no fee until you receive benefits. Call today.
When we first began reporting on suicide in Guyana, we knew the country had a big problem. Little did we know how big. A few months into working on the story, the World Health Organization would release a report in September 2014 saying Guyana had the highest estimated rate of suicide in the world. So why are so many in this CARICOM nation taking their own lives? And what is being done about it? To understand this story some more, we went into the Berbice region of Guyana at 6 degrees north and 58 degrees west. Samindra Surjbali lived through her husband's suicide in 1990. 13 years later, her eldest son would make the same fatal choice because of problems with his wife.
He ended up hanging himself.
And then he ended up hanging himself. Not myself.
It was like I was just not myself. I couldn't feel my body. I was just numb and crying.
Only cry.
The pain would be compounded yet again when her second son drank poison. He too had marital problems.
He cried saying, "Mommy, I'm not going to live."
Whether it's by hanging or drinking poison, in Guyana, almost everybody knows someone who's committed suicide. They're typically poor males, under 35, uneducated, Hindu, and East Indian. Cultural influences from India also play a role, where some would rather kill themselves than bring shame on the family. Now Guyana has the highest rate of suicide in the Caribbean, with almost 7 suicides each week. In fact, the World Health Organization says that's the highest in the world.
Do we have a serious problem? The answer unequivocally is yes.
The WHO says most people who commit suicide have a mental disorder. To combat the problem, Guyana has increased mental health funding over the years, established a suicide hotline, and instituted school and community-based suicide prevention programs. But even after all this, there are still fewer than 5 psychiatrists for the country's 750,000 people. The WHO says mental health professionals mostly lack expertise. The number of suicides remains disturbingly high and have even taken an uglier turn. Now a rash of murder-suicides tops the daily news headlines.
Appears to be a murder and suicide.
Unless we are able to identify people with depression, unless we are able to identify people with other mental health problems, we will continue to be unable to address this.
In 2014, it distributed cabinets to farmers to lock away agricultural pesticides, which is how most people here end their lives. But perhaps a more important part of the plan is changing the way that people think. For the past several months, this university in Georgetown has been offering free workshops on how to be less rash when dealing with life's problems.
Cell phone taken away, commit suicide. Your mother say don't talk to the guy older than you, commit suicide. Psychology is being taught on many different levels. It gives you the foundation, it makes you strong to understand your own personal issues, okay? And to find solution.
It gave me a reason to see that suicide is not it.
But will more programs finally be enough to roll away the cloud that's diminished families in this CARICOM nation?
I miss every moment. We were close, all of them.
Samindra now has only 1 child left. She'll always be left with more questions than answers. After that show aired in Jamaica, Kareem Constantine wrote, "Is anyone else watching at 18 degrees north on television Jam? This suicide epidemic in Guyana is serious. Highest rate in the world? SMH." And Jillian Marie wrote, "Who would have thought Guyana would have the highest suicide rate in the world? At least 7 suicides per week, though? What?" This next one is everyone's worst nightmare. Our story on Tony Yarbo, a Brooklyn man of Puerto Rican heritage who spent 22 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
The only thing I wanted was my mother, my little sister, and my cousin back. To wake up from this nightmare that I thought I was in. I signed it. I just wanted to be left alone. I just threw my life away. I almost lost it. I tried to kill myself. And then you come and snatch me up out of my cell at 2 o'clock in the morning, take me down to the court, and they just release me. No money, no identification, no place to live.
While there may be no sum large enough to compensate for the years that he lost, in November 2014, New York State paid Yarbo $3.6 million, the equivalent of roughly $164,000 for every year he spent behind bars. Who doesn't love to root for the underdog? This next story took us from St. Lucia to Miami, Florida, to the finals of America's Top Chef, where Nina Compton showcased her small island chops to the world.
Top Chef is back. I am from the island of St. Lucia.
The first challenge, it was 19 of us. People like, where is St. Lucia? They were just like, don't worry about her. She's gonna get kicked off first round. I just said, stay quiet and just cook your food. And I ended up winning the first challenge.
The chef who won the challenge tonight, and that chef is Nina. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
I did, goat, which we do a lot in the Caribbean. I use breadfruit. I use coconut milk. Any chance I could, I did it because I saw it as whether you were St. Lucian or Jamaican or Barbadian, this was our moment to shine.
After we taped the story at Scarpetta in Miami, where Compton worked as head chef, Compton packed up her knives and traveled the world for a while. She's now settled in New Orleans, where she's set to open her own restaurant in summer 2015, reflecting what else? Her Caribbean roots. So this is where we bring 18 Degrees North to a close for its second season. Thanks to you for watching week after week, as we brought you stories from around the Caribbean and around the world. We appreciate your comments, so certainly keep them coming. Tweet us or become a Facebook fan and send us your story ideas. Remember, we're here to keep all of us connected to the Caribbean. On behalf of the more than 80 people who worked to put together this season, and I have to stop to bring our producer online. This is Bobby Misick, this is our director, O'Neill Miller of OCM Productions. I'm Zara Burton. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next season.
18 Degrees North is a production of Global Reporters for the Caribbean.